Hi. Hi Yeshim. It's really nice to finally have a chat with you, and I would love for you to go ahead and introduce yourself, just a little bit about you.
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Yeshim Iqbal. I'm currently a senior research scientist at New York University, but I think the work that we're going to be talking about today is my involvement as founder and director of Kanpetirui, which is Bangladesh's first and only emotional support and suicide prevention helpline.
Yes. Thank you so much for bringing up your work that we are going to be talking about today. So just a little bit for the listeners, Kanpitiroy in English would be I'm here to listen, or I have lent you my ear to an extent. However, it is a mental health helpline. And being the first one of its kind in Dhaka, I would like to segue into the first question, which is what made you start this? What led you to its initiation of the first of its kind in Dhaka, actually? Yeah.
It's one of my favorite questions, so thank you for asking it. I used to be a volunteer on such a helpline myself. This is many, many years ago at this point. I was living in Boston in the United States. And as I was doing this work, essentially just kind of being there to answer calls from anybody who wanted to call into the crisis line. I started thinking about how it would be great if we had something like this in Bangladesh. This Dhaka is Bangladesh is where I grew up. It's where all my friends and family are, and there was not any kind of telephone-based support line here at the time. There's a lot of features of these helplines that make them a really important part of not just suicide prevention strategy, but also supporting folks who might be in some kind of crisis more generally, right? They're really accessible. All you need is a cell phone. They're anonymous. They're confidential, and really importantly, a lot of these helplines are volunteer run. So the people who are answering the calls are volunteers. They're there because they care. They're there because they want to be. And that makes all the difference in terms of somebody who might be reaching out looking for support on that phone.
See, that's like a lot of work that KPR. I'm going to be using KPR as the initiation from
Sure.
now on.
Yeah, that's our short form.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But it sounds like a lot of good work that KPR has been doing, and it's been what, a decade and more for now. And I realized because it's the first helpline in there. Can I ask about were there any obstacles that you faced as you started this lineup? Did you come back from New York to start this, or were in Dhaka at the time when you started it?
I took some time off before I started graduate school to come to Bangladesh and live here and kind of try and get it off the ground. I really devoted all of my time and effort. This was in 2012, the end of 2012 and the beginning of 2013. And we opened our lines on April 28th, 2013. So we're actually coming up on 11 years. You asked about obstacles. I could write a book about obstacles. We could
See,
have many,
but
many conversations about obstacles. Uh, there's no money. In fact, worldwide, all of the helplines, they're volunteer run, but as a concept, right, it doesn't make any money. Right. And it needs funding to run. That's always a challenge. Currently, we are very generously supported by the Sajida Foundation, which is a foundation here in Dhaka that really works on health and poverty related issues, and they've really generously have been helping us out since the pandemic, actually. But it's still really hard to know that you're going to have consistent funding. It was always a challenge. We had a very, very, very tight budget that was almost entirely from individual donors. Starting a helpline like this, you're up against a lot of stigma. There's a lot of taboo on and around the topic of suicide, around talking about mental health. And while that's beginning to change, while the landscape of speaking about mental health is certainly changing, at least among those who are, kind of urban and middle class and really on the internet a lot. That being said, there's still quite a lot of I would, I guess, still just use the word stigma. I mean, people are very willing to put a little like on a Facebook post that says something like, it's okay to not be okay. But that doesn't mean that folks are, for instance, comfortable reaching out about their own concerns, right? Or talking inside of their family about someone who might be struggling with a mental illness or with a mental health concern. So we're still kind of really up against those kinds of things as well.
I see. Yes, I mean, on the conversation of like doing it, like talking about it at home, there is also the concept of the intergenerational gap on the understanding of what mental health is and what mental health needs are. So I can still see that stigma being the most relevant word to go ahead with like dealing with this work that you are in, like working with. Um, I know it's only been like it's been 10 years. Whoa, that's a lot of time. And I'm like so glad they're still standing strong. Sorry about that. Despite inconsistent funding, as you mentioned, but can I ask, like, has there been any moment or two that you found extremely like memorable that like is your favorite moment with KPR so far?
I mean, my personal favorite moments are probably quite different from those of our volunteer and our staff. So when we started, it was really just a few of us kind of there with the idea. And then we trained a couple cohorts of volunteers, and those and then we start kind of open our helplines for a couple hours a week. And then from there, we slowly expanded. We trained more and more volunteers, and then the previous volunteers helped us train the new ones, and we expanded our hours and kind of grew in that way. I myself do not answer calls on this helpline in Dhaka.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not kind of a first responder in the way that our actual volunteers are. So for me, the really special moments are when I see how hard these volunteers work to get to the office, to do this work, to show up every day. Uh, every single time I see them, it's kind of that's what inspires me to keep doing it. Some of our volunteers who are now our staff members have been with the organization since the very beginning. So I trained them in the first or the second groups, and they are still running the show today. Um, they know way more about it than I do at this point. So
I
in a way, you should be talking to them and not to me, but that's okay.
saw a little
So
part to this interview. Who knows if I'm allowed?
yeah, exactly. So for me, I think those are my favorite moments, when I show up and they tell me what's going on and they tell me what to do and they tell me, you know, what I need to know, and they know more about it than I do. For me, that is incredibly special. And it really makes me feel like we're doing something great.
I really love to hear that because as a founder, being able to know that what you've created is having this like domino effect that it's continuing year after year, I can see that it being like so dear to you. It's wonderful to hear about it. I know we touched on this just a little bit about how conversations surrounding mental health being still a little bit stigmatized or at least being touchy or considering the taboo that is in Taka. Would you say that, like, how have you noticed? You've worked like it's close to 11 years. How have you noticed the change in home country, Dhaka, like across, I guess, the conversation on mental health, and you as well as mentioned that you're also moving across New York, is you? New York and Dhaka. How would you say that even the diaspora has responded to like the conversation around mental health, at least between the youth and their family? If you have noticed anything on that like line, yes.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I think on a superficial level, the conversation has changed quite a lot, right? People know about these things, they know these words, right? They know phrases, they know about self-care, right? I think probably what they're seeing in their time on social media is very different from what it potentially was 10 years ago when we started, right?
Definitely.
10 years ago, we came into this space that didn't really there wasn't an existing platform for
No.
us to come and start talking about these things, right? Now if an organization is focusing on mental health and they're coming onto the internet, they're coming onto social media, there actually is an existing platform, right? There are a lot more people working on it. There are a lot more people thinking about it and talking about it. There's a much bigger network to connect to than there was before. As I mentioned, I don't know how far that awareness is quite going yet, right? It's a very different thing to just see something on social media, to like look at that reel and just keep moving on to the next reel, than it is to really grapple with something that might actually be going on in your own family, right? To really face, let's say a close friend or a family member, or you yourself are, having suicidal feelings, for instance, right? To really kind of face that and understand it and get help for it is a very different thing from just the conversation changing, right? I'm
Yeah.
not sure that we've made that connection yet, but we're
Mhm.
definitely trying to. We're all definitely trying to.
That is true. Same line of like conversation in the sense that what do you think like some of the next steps could be even with KPR maybe or some of the other mental health organizations that I know are currently operating in Dhaka, they're also opening up. How do you think what next steps do you think they could take or would do you want to take as like KPR's founder? Like if you have thought of that, yes.
Sure. So on a just a practical note, KPR is open 12 hours a day, 3
Yeah.
p.m. to 3 a.m. every day. I would love for us to be open 24 hours a day. I think that a helpline is only as good as it's open as long as it can possibly be open, which is 24 hours a day. I would also like everyone in Bangladesh to know that we exist. So it's a big country. In fact, not just in Bangladesh, you mentioned the diaspora. Bengali speakers around the world. I would like to where you are in the world. We're here for you, right? And I would like that message to kind of go to everyone. It's hard. It is hard to reach a lot of people in that way. But more broadly speaking, as you know, if I were talking about organizations who are all thinking about topics around mental health, around well-being more broadly and not just us, I would say that um, we probably actually need to take mental health as part of overall well-being that really encompasses physical health and sort of access to resources, ability to live healthy, fulfilled lives, right? So, when someone calls me on the helpline, well, they don't call me. When someone calls the helpline and I hear about these calls later, right? These problems do not have easy fixes,
Yeah.
right? A lot of the things that they're talking about are issues that are really deeply rooted in society, who kind of fulfill themselves the way that they want to. Their like lack of exercise, their lack of connecting with outside spaces, right? Their kind of oftentimes their struggle to connect with their family in a way that is fulfilling to them. And these things, they don't have easy fixes. And they're not the kind of thing that you can really, send someone to a therapist for 3 sessions with, right? Or, treat with psychiatry, or even, I can help on the helpline in the moment that we're talking. But those of us who are interested in mental health need to really think about these societal determinants of health overall. And we might need to take a little bit of a step back if we want to do that.
I see. No, that is very true. Like considering all the aspects that do make up your life because it contributes to your mental health to a significant level. Just talking about what you can do to help it like at that moment is not as helpful as taking those little steps that make the whole staircase of treating your mental health the right
Oh,
way.
we need both. Like we have to certainly help people who are in crisis in the moment. And
Yes,
there's definitely a space for psychologists and psychiatrists. There's a huge need. We just don't have enough of them, in fact, especially in Bangladesh. But for people to really feel that they're, to feel healthy, it's a bigger thing, right? And it connects to a lot of different factors.
yeah,
And we those of us who work in this area need to keep our eyes on those factors as well.
definitely. I I agree with that. I do want to go back to the idea that you guys just like in 2023 you celebrated your like 10th year. Um, as you mentioned, you do hope that your helpline moves into the 24-hour, always there, 24/7 help. However, I'm not sure how far do you think that plan is, or what are the immediate next steps that you're planning for KPR as you move into the next decade, hopefully, of working.
I think it's far away, unfortunately. Going to 24 hours is a huge amount of resources. It took us 10 years to get to 12 hours a day. I would not be surprised if it took another 10 or another 20. That's okay.
Yeah.
It is, I think this idea that you have to, you know, grow very fast, very quickly to be successful is just not an idea that I necessarily agree with.
I see.
I think that being around, being consistent, being there for, you know, I think that has meant a lot to our callers and to those of us who are working with the organization. Immediate next steps. I'm a researcher. I have some research planned. We now have 10 years worth of data that I'm very excited about. So I'm hoping to be able to tell the world a little bit about you know, what suicidal behavior looked like in Bangladesh, what kinds of things people are experiencing that would lead them to have a crisis, what kinds of policies and operations we can do to make a difference to people, how, you know, how we try and help our volunteers do the best job that they can. I think we have a lot of really information coming out that could be very valuable to people, not just in Bangladesh, but around the world.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm very excited about that. We are working on outreach. We have some exciting outreach, both online and offline, coming up that we're looking forward to sharing. Hopefully, new collaborations with other organizations.
Mhm.
Yeah, just you asked for immediate steps, so that's what I have in the next couple months.
And it sounds really exciting, like the coming year, coming few years that you have planned. I really hope the research goes well because it sounds like you have an extensive amount of data to work on, and that's always exciting as a researcher. And I'm so glad to hear that this is something that's ongoing. This is something that you guys are pulling through that is also, at least for now, getting the funding that it hope it gets more funding. That's always the hope. Hope it is getting the resources that it deserves. And I'm so glad that it's moved up from if I remember correctly, in the beginning it was 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. every like 4 days a week, was it? In between.
Yeah, it was a couple hours a day, a couple days a week, which
Yeah.
was awkward, but it was how we started,
I know.
and luckily we managed to grow past that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad because I saw like the hours grow over the years, or at least after I started taking like the attention that, oh, there are mental health organizations here. There's something called Kanpetroi. There were also a few specific therapy clinics that had opened up, after which I started paying attention. I was like, oh my God, they do such great work. And I was so glad that I was able to reach out about this. Thank you so much for your time today. I am so glad we got to chat about Kanpetroi, and it was so wonderful. If you have any last words, please go ahead.
No, that's it. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.